Okay, today we're going to talk about the parts of the shoe, different types of shoes, and how shoes wear. So first of all, let's talk about the parts of the shoe. If we take it from a very high level, there's three main parts to a shoe. First, this bottom part, this darker colored rubber, is the outsole. It is there for durability and traction. This middle part of the shoe is called the midsole. The midsole is there for cushioning. It's usually made up of a foam. This foam sometimes has two types of foam or three types of foam, then some of them are more firm than others. Sometimes there's pieces of plastic integrated in there, and those extra pieces can affect the stability of the shoe and how it works with your foot and your gait. The third part of the shoe is the upper. Usually this is fabric, and it is there to keep your foot locked into the shoe. So those are the three main parts of the shoe. Let's talk about a couple other names of key parts that many of them you'll recognize, some you might not. First, the tongue. Tongue is there above your instep, keep everything in place. Behind, here in the back, there's a piece of plastic oftentimes embedded in there called the heel counter. Sometimes it's a more sturdy, sometimes a little bit more minimal, but that is what helps additionally keep your foot locked to that shoe. If we look at the bottom, we can see grooves designed in here. These are called flex grooves. Those flex grooves are designed to help us go more smoothly from the middle part of the shoe off the toe. So that helping with that toe off. If we look at the shoe from above, we can see this is called the toe box. It's measured in both width and height, and shoes will vary in width and height to match different feet. Sometimes a person will have a really wide foot or might be a little bit more narrow. Same thing, might have a very tall instep or they might have a very shallow instep, and so that can vary on that spectrum. And then we have something called rocker. So rocker is something designed into the shoe to help you move from heel to toe more smoothly. So this brand, Karhu, they use a fulcrum. So their rocker is in the middle part of the shoe. And so that helps move forward, and you'll feel that very noticeably right here. Now we'll compare that to this Hoka, where the rocker, you can probably see it pretty easily. The rocker is in the front of the shoe. So this will feel very different from that Karhu. The rocker, the intent of that rocker is again to help you move smoothly from heel to toe. People with pain, the rocker can be a very, very helpful design element. So now let's talk about types of shoes. This is just a standard neutral shoe. Another word you could use is cushioning, an average amount of foam, of foam. If we compare this to some shoes, and I don't have one right here because I don't wear stability shoes and because I'm very bow-legged and I'm on the outside of my foot. So if a stability shoe would have foam a lot of times on this inside part, this medial part of the shoe, just right here, that is intended to stop a person from coming in too much. So again, I'm too far out, so it wouldn't work for me. Sometimes again, they'll have pieces of plastic on this medial side as well to assist in that. So that's a stability shoe, but it generally looks much the same in terms of overall shoe. Now we're going to compare that to a more minimal shoe. So this shoe, relative to the shoe we just had, has less foam usually overall. And the other thing that is usually pretty different about a minimal shoe is a measure that we can take into consideration for shoes is called the drop or the offset. If we measure the height of the toe and the height of the heel and we compare them, that is the offset, and it's usually compared to millimeters. So this shoe, this brand Altra, all of their shoes are 0 drop, so it's 0 difference. Now, there's shoes that, traditionally shoes through the 90s and 2000 were mostly higher drop, so 10 or 12 millimeters higher in the heel than the toe. So these days you'll have shoes going from 0 all the way up to 12 or 13 millimeters and everything in between. Another hallmark characteristic of a minimal shoe, they oftentimes will have a wider toe box for the intent is the more natural feeling shoe, less of a shoe on your foot. Now we're going to go the very opposite end of the spectrum from those minimal shoes. We're going to go maximal. It's on the over here. So this maximal shoe has a ton of cushion. A lot of times they'll have a rocker built in because there's so much foam, they just don't naturally want to bend where your toe wants to bend, so they'll have to put a rocker kind of right at the front there where your toe wants to bend. So this shoe will just give you a lot more protection. Yes, you're going to have a heavier shoe, although the newer foams make them not terrible these days. Maximal shoe. And now we have a trail shoe. So this trail shoe, three key hallmarks of a trail shoe. One is the grip on the bottom. The outsole is usually sturdier and knobbier. That gives you traction on wet and gross, rocky, rooty conditions, muddy. It also protects you from stones and getting bruises on your feet. The midsole, oftentimes, if it doesn't have a ton of cushion in there, it'll have a rock plate, a piece of plastic in there that also similarly protects you from those stones from bruising your feet. And then third, a trail shoe will often have an upper that is a more tight weave. Sometimes it'll have a little bit of weatherproofing that'll keep it'll let you a little bit more dry in kind of wet, dewy conditions. Sometimes a shoe will have Gore-Tex built in as well. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about performance shoes. So this is a track spike. This is meant for running on in track and field. A track spike typically is just really thin, usually not a whole lot of cushion. And then the bottom, I don't have the spike screwed into this one. This one has 6 holes for spikes, and the spikes will go for anywhere from 1/8 of an inch to a 1/2 inch, depending upon the conditions and if it's cross country or track. And I'll give you extra grip. So this is just incredibly light. You don't want to do a lot of miles in this because usually there's not enough protection, so you'll probably get hurt. This is for race day and maybe a couple workouts. On those performance shoe topic, this is one meant for running on the roads. So this is a performance shoe from Saucony. The road versions of these performance shoes will have really, really light, really, really bouncy. It's almost like a bouncy ball foam. These shoes, you just get a ton of response back out of them. People that are training in find that they don't beat their bodies up as much, and they oftentimes are much, much faster. This foam a lot of times is a little squirrely because it's so bouncy. So many of them will have a carbon fiber or a nylon plate integrated into this midsole. You can kind of see it here. It's this black area. You can see it on both sides. And that directs that force forward as that athlete is running rather than kind of going off in one direction or the other. These shoes, usually not very much outsole on there. They're meant for speed. This is, again, for races, maybe a couple workouts, but they do not last very long. And so you just know buying them that this is for, you might get 100 or 200 miles off these. And for those who are going for the time, it can be well worth it. I do want to talk about how shoes wear. So if we look at the outsole, this darker area, if you get a shoe that's old enough, a lot of times they'll wear through this into the white, into the midsole. And it's really a problem, mostly a problem if it happens asymmetrically, like on the outside or the inside, because that person has a natural tendency to be that way, the shoe wears that way, and then it's going to push them out even further than they naturally would go. So it tends to exacerbate their already biomechanical abnormalities or deficiencies or unique parts. And so that can cause injury in a lot of people when the shoe gets old enough and that is worn through. This midsole will get compressed, and it gets compressed under the foot where there's the peak pressures. So peak pressure a lot of times under the heel and then under the forefoot, usually more so under the forefoot. And you can't always see it from the outside. Occasionally, if a shoe is extremely old and that person really has a tendency to be on the outside of their foot or the inside of the foot, and you put this on a flat surface and look at it from behind, you can see it kind of tilted. But a lot of times you can't see that. The shoe could be quite old and the person's complaining of no cushion. In one way you can find out, you can just take out the sock liner and you can feel in there where the ball of their foot is, the front of their foot is, and a lot of times you can feel a big depression in there. You can also cheat. You can look at the sock liner and you can see a lot of times this will be depressed under the middle part of the foot or the big toe or the lateral, and it's that shoe under the foam underneath this is reflected in the sock liner. And so those are signs that it's time to get a new shoe. The upper will wear, this fabric often will tear with an old enough shoe. It'll tear a lot of times at the widest part of the shoe, especially if that shoe wasn't wide enough for that foot. You'll tear over the big toenail in some people, and it'll wear out this fabric. Sometimes will tear in the back of the heel as well. So